Instructional Designers in Offices Drinking Coffee is brought to you by Domino, makers of Domino One, the all-in-one, cloud-based e-learning authoring tool for teams. You can learn more at domino.com. Now, here's this week's episode. Here we go.
Special effects already. Here we go. Good morning, everybody.
Hello. Oh, it's always good to get a little dance in the morning.
Ooh, gets the blood flowing. Does everybody do their morning stretch?
That's right. Everyone limber.
It's not as early for you guys on the East Coast, though. Geez, you've been up for hours.
We have, but the dancing doesn't begin till 9 a.m. Eastern. We know that. Or 10 a.m. Eastern.
Or 10, something like that.
10.
Either one.
Yeah. It doesn't begin till there's 2 cups of coffee. That's the rule for me. Anyway.
We got everybody's locations dropping into the chat, but nobody's dropping their weather reports. We need some weather. How's things going out there, everybody?
Yeah, it's been a rough stretch in Manitoba. We've got that on the radar already in the chat. So,
oh, is that what it is?
And what an awesome turnout! Southwest Germany, folks from Peru, all kinds of all over the places.
And I can't imagine why so many people from all over the world would want to be here today. But I'm guessing it's because we have a very special guest, Chris, who's hanging out with us.
Friends. Conrad Gottfredson is joining us for the first time ever, and we're so, I think the British would say, we're so chuffed about that. No, chuffed is a positive thing. I'm pretty sure that they use it positively. I
believe so. I believe so.
No, this is awesome. Conrad, there may actually be a few folks, although we know you're the draw here today, there may be a few folks who haven't actually met you yet, so give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you. It's great to be with you all, and I want to return and just listen in on more. This is a lot of fun. I'm in my hometown where I grew up, Circleville, Utah, the home of Butch Cassidy. He was the first consultant to leave our community, and I think I was the second. A town of about 700 people, and his model was a little different than ours.
a different revenue stream, I think we would call it.
Yeah. But he was creative and certainly creative in his work. I ended up going to university, and I have a PhD in instructional psychology and technology. 1984. Finished that, then went to work for Standard Oil of Ohio, and then within 5 years decided that I wanted to just work with organizations, helping them figure out how to be more effective in how they train their people and support them. And so I started my own little consulting firm, and I've been working with organizations since. About a decade ago, Bob Mosier, who's a great friend of mine, and I finally talked him into joining me, and we created Apply Synergies, and have spent our time since working on helping organizations. And our focus has been learning in the flow of work, and how to measure impact, and developing a methodology that is performance-based methodology for organizations. So that's the story.
That's brilliant. And between the two of you, I mean, the phrasing that most folks might know is the 5 moments of need. That's probably, the umbrella that I think most things that you do cover. So maybe there are some folks with us who haven't actually. Before we even talk about them, tell me, how did you guys get there? What was the the process? Because it's, to me, a very practical, pragmatic model, and yet it stands out fairly different from a lot of the other things that we have as models in the L&D world. So were you guys just sitting around? Was it I don't know, sitting around having a glass of wine one night and said, you know what, this let's make this thing up? Or how did that come about? What was sort of the background of getting there?
Well, actually, it was in 1984 when I stepped into the real world of work out of graduate school. I was responsible for, in Warrensville, Ohio, the help desk, the training group, and also the technical publications group. And as I looked at all of that, I realized that it really wasn't about training, it was about performance. That my work wasn't just to develop a training solution. My work was to ensure that people could perform effectively on the job. And because of that view that I had through the lens of those three groups, I began to realize that there were moments beyond learning something new or learning more about something. Those are the two main learning moments, learn new or learn more. And the model I have learned over the years is the model for learning more is very different than the model for learning something new. But most organizations tend to apply the same learning model on both of those moments. Big mistake, expensive mistake. But the moment that I discovered first that I hadn't anticipated, in my academic training was the moment of apply. And I realized that if it doesn't work then, what good have I done? What I built a great training system, but if people can't apply, if they can't perform in the workplace effectively, then I've wasted my life energy building something. So that moment of apply became the most important moment to me. And I started to focus on it first, and then backing into the learn new and learn more. And as I focused on apply, I learned that in the workflow, there were two other unique moments. The moment of solve, when things go wrong. We had a help desk, working on that. But solve is a very different training challenge and learning challenge than apply. It's part of apply, but you've got to use different cognitive pieces and approaches. And then the last that rolled over the top of me to where I couldn't ignore it was the moment of change. And that was especially poignant for me when I realized that as people and skills became deeply rooted, that is where they became automated, which you have to do and which happens as people do their work, then overriding that is unlearning to relearn, was the greatest training challenge that there is. And it's not going to be solved with a lunch and learn or with just briefing people with a table that shows this is what it was and this is what it is now. When skills and knowledge is deeply learned to where it's become automated, it takes support over time. And all of that led me to be acutely aware of the work that Gloria Geary did in the 90s. And so I started to take and work with, the whole performance support in the context of the 5 moments. And here's been the journey. It's all, it's not training alone, it's training and performance, and all of that being orchestrated with a performance first mindset. And that's what surfaced there in 1984 and has guided everything that we've been doing since.
Mm-hmm. I've always found it kind of fascinating that, we have Gloria Geary's work, that far ago. There's that whole foundation that moves beyond, the idea of formal learning and helping people learn in the process of and solve problems, et cetera, the informal stuff. But so much of our industry has always been constantly, focused on that formal. We're going to make a course. We're going to, and it's kind of, I think it's part of it's just cultural, or our L&D cultural habit that we think of ourselves, as trainers or as A course is something that we can point at and define, we can achieve, it's done, and now it's, sort of out there. And yet there's been so much valuable and important study that shows that it's not just a case of, if you build it, they will come. That only works in the movies. It doesn't really work in the real world of L&D.
Well, and the real world of growth and development, there is a training piece, right? Where, particularly what we found where skills where the critical impact of failure is significant to catastrophic. You don't want to chance learning that on your own. And you want the power of an instructor for those kinds of skills. But regardless, once I've been trained, I've just started the learning process. No training takes me to where I need to be. I have to navigate from that training event, whether it's an e-learning event or a face-to-face or a virtual event. I've got to transition from that through this dicey world called transfer, where I've got to take whatever it is that I mastered, in my training and adapt it and integrate it into my workflow, into my work. And I've got to transfer that and navigate the forgetting curve, which we know from Ebbinghaus and others that people start to forget, right? They start to forget. So that transfer, train, but then transfer, we've just thrown learners over the fence and say, good luck. And it was nice. It was nice being with you. And by the way, back in the early days, here's a 200-page manual. We don't do that anymore. We just throw them over the fence. And then once people learners fight their way through that transfer phase, then there's the sustainment in an ever-changing world today that is changing more rapidly than we ever imagined. So I've got to sustain my skill set and adapt to change, in all of that, and continuously improve and innovate and do all of those things. Well, that's our world. We have to face not just the training that's the safe turf. They're on our turf, but the transfer, we've got to step into the workflow on their turf, the turf of the business, and then sustainment. That's not our world either. We've got to step into the workflow. So our world has to include, and our focus has to include, not just the training, but learning in the flow of work, growing, developing in the flow of work, and that's where performance support takes us. But it's a blend and it's an integration. Performance support needs to be in the classroom, where we're training learners to be independent, using the performance support that then will take them rapidly through that transfer phase and support them and allow us to manage change in the flow of work. And that's the brilliance of Gloria Gary, where she realized that we need something, what she called an EPSS, what we call a digital coach, which supports people, in the flow of work as they're doing their job. Mm-hmm. Was that more than you ever wanted to hear?
No, it's fabulous for sure. I'm just asking about looking at the chats and the questions. I think first off, one of my immediate reflections was you were very fortunate then in your first role to already see the spectrum, because so many of us, we're hired or we're part of an L&D team, and we only see what that L&D team is currently, responsible for and doing. But you kind of were given a gift, really, of all of that, all of those things, to be able to recognize all of that, very early on, et cetera. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. This is a question in the chat, and who knows if we're going to get an answer, but let's give it a whirl. Only because it's kind of how long does it take to change a company's mindset to be performance based from your experience and past project? How long and what does it take to change?
Well, it's faster to change the organization and our key stakeholders than it is to change L&D. We've got a lot of benchmarking data and experience that helps us. Key stakeholders get it. Frontline managers get it. When we deliver effective performance on the job, they get it, and the demand becomes significant. But the resistance and the real challenge is at the level of L&D, unfortunately, and that mindset shift is more challenging because we're so ingrained in the traditions of learning.
It's really it's such an indictment of our field, and I know you say it with love, and I appreciate it, and it's always good to hear it because in my time in the industry, meeting some consultants and some folks that are just kind of on the fringes of what we do have always mentioned, and it still comes up from time to time, where they'll say, I hate getting into a room when the trainers are there. Even though what they're trying to sell, or trying to influence, the room of executives is maybe a support tool or maybe it's even a training tool or something like that. It's like everybody, like you said, everybody gets it, what I'm trying to say, unless there's somebody from the L&D team or the training team there. And then the conversations always go south. And it's frustrating to hear that, especially from people on the outside as well as folks on the inside. It should be easier. You'd think we would get it, right?
Yeah. Well, the best people I've ever had the privilege of knowing, and the most devoted and dedicated people that I've ever worked with, are in L&D. And that's why I'm still in this game. That's why I'm still in this profession. I do this because of the people, and they are remarkable and committed. We just, in the world of instructional design, we have some traditions that are really difficult to step away from. I mentioned before we started this podcast that I've just been writing a series of blog articles on performance objectives versus learning objectives. And, I remember the first time that I suggested that Mager's learning objectives don't really help when you move to a performance first mindset. And it was like I had slapped their child. And, it was worse than the Academy Awards. It was really sad. And so you have to recognize in our industry that there are these deeply held views, and we have to play sweeter music. So that's what we've been working to do all these years.
We really are a funny industry because so many folks come into our space and our industry, from a sort of sideways, and they learn by an apprenticeship model where, they're here's what we do. So you do what the L&D team that you've joined has always done, especially if, you're new and you're learning. I sometimes, wisecrack that in high school, there wasn't a table for, on careers day, there wasn't a table for instructional design or training or something. It's not something that crosses most people's minds until they've actually been in the work world and they see that there's this thing. And then somehow, maybe they were the expert in something and they got asked to teach a class on it or whatever. They realize that they really like this space and they find value in it, and they recognize that they can provide value in it. But it's also a way that we end up passing on a lot of bad, cultural habits within our space, that this is what we do, as opposed to necessarily being, foundational in kind of a learning process about how things, really could work better all the time too.
Yeah, that is so true. So I've been at this since 1984, right? And walking into hundreds of organizations each year, helping them and working with them. So I'm going to share an insight that I hope doesn't offend anyone here, because, and it's okay if your experience is different, but here's my experience. Every organization that I have worked with who have told me that they follow ADDIE, when I've asked them to open up the hood and show me what's underneath ADDIE, show me the particulars, show me the details of what you do, I find that there's a huge vacuum, that everybody seems to be doing their own thing, that we haven't taken this on in the consistent way that we need to. And that's good, things are happening. But
Right.
but instructional design deserves to be to have more detail in it, and so in all of these years, what I've tried to do is, with a performance first mindset, looking at the moments of apply, solve, change, ask the question. So in our heritage of experience, in the applied research that we've done, how do we do this rapidly and in an agile way? And so that's consolidating practices, doing these things that need to be done. And that's what's brought about this performance first methodology, the 5 moments of need methodology that we call Enable. And Enable is really ADDIE, but it covers the train, transfer, sustain. It covers learning in the workflow. And so, the EN is engaged to align. That's the intake process. And what we find is that from organization to organization, that intake process can vary. But we've developed within the engaged to align an approach where you can work with a key stakeholder and change the conversation from a key stakeholder saying, I need 3 days of this, or I need you to do this, where we're order takers, to where you step back and say, okay, I understand that. What are the challenges that are driving this request? What are the opportunities that are driving this request? And what are the measurable outcomes that you would like to see based upon those challenges and so and opportunities that you're wanting? And how does that align to the strategic initiatives of the organization? That's the piece that we've learned to do to change the conversation in the engaged to align. The A is analyze to design. That's where, instead of having analyze and design, we do this in an agile simultaneously. You're analyzing and designing simultaneously. And that's the heart of the shift to performance first in there. That's where we've learned and how to map the workflow and critical impact of failure analysis and so forth. And then the B is build, and every organization builds differently, but we have a few practices in there associated with agile practices of design and build, where we iterate, develop an iteration plan based upon some unique things in analyze to design. L is leverage to sustain. That's where you leverage people, technology, and processes to continuously optimize your solution and to make sure that you have the relationship with the line of business to keep things current. And then E, of course, is evaluate, which we all would like to do. But the question is, can you evaluate by gathering data on an ongoing basis automatically that gives us impact, view of impact? And that's what Gloria Geary helped us do with when you put an EPSS, a digital coach, in the flow of work that's supporting people in the flow of work, we can actually gather data about that performance. And so it changes the whole evaluation process. So since 1984, we've been working and applying and evolving this methodology. And it's ADDIE, but it's an agile version of ADDIE, if you will, that is broader, that takes in the workflow and workflow learning.
Very cool. Yeah, and we should probably mention, Brent has pulled it up, the white paper up, but there's more details available for folks if they want to go to the 5 Moments of Need website. There's actually, you can download this resource that you and Bob Mosher have put together with this framework. And I don't know, Brent, if you've got that handy, if you've got the link to that, you can drop that in the chat. We'll also obviously drop that in the chat at the end as well too. So, I was thinking about this, the L&D focus on, formal learning, let's call it. And one of the things that I've always valued about the 5 moments of need as a model is I think of it kind of like I think of it with reference to the improv group, improv comedy, where they have a saying, yes, and so the model obviously still respects and values formal learning. That's still, plays an important role, but you're saying yes, and we've got to move into those other spaces as well and be able to support people, through that. So I've always thought of it as I've always thought of it as a very a positive approach to thinking about what we need to do, as opposed to a finger wagging. Sometimes people in our industry are like to there's a sense sometimes that we're not shaming people, but we're kind of poo-pooing things. But sometimes, depending on which conference session you're at. But I've always thought of the 5 moments of need as being very positive, both from the perspective of where you might be starting out as an L&D professional, making formal stuff and thinking about the yes and now you can add these other things on because they are super critical. We're not throwing out babies with bathwaters, etc. It incorporates what we already do, and it gives us a chance to actually improve and do better and do more.
Yeah, many years ago, I was in London at Trafalgar Square, and there was a bookstore off of the corner there. And I went in the bookstore and I found these books, Learn in a Weekend. They were self-instructional. There were 16 of them, and I bought every one of them. Learn in a Weekend, and one of them was Learn to Scuba Dive in a Weekend. But I thought, under 100 pages, I can learn this on my own and in a weekend. And I was thrilled. So I'm on the plane flying home to Utah, right? And I'm thinking, Bora Bora, I'm going to go scuba diving. And I opened the page, and jumping off the page was this word, barotrauma. And I had no idea what that meant, but the word trauma I thought, I ought to pay attention to this. And so I read the definition, which didn't help me, but in parentheses next to it, it said burst lungs. And it was at that point where I thought, maybe I don't want to learn this on my own. maybe I need a trainer to go with me, because I don't want to burst lungs. And that changed. At that point, I began to look at the critical impact of failure. We actually developed a critical impact of failure rating scale that we use, so that as we identify these skills that people need to be able to do, we use the critical impact of failure rating to identify those skills where it's significant to catastrophic if people fail. And that's where you truly justify having people stop their work to learn. There's no way in the world we want to send people, learners into the workflow to chance those critical impact of failures skills. And so that's really powerful. And if you take complexity and you have a skill that is significant to catastrophic and it's highly complex, there is a challenge, that we've got to meet. I once had a key stakeholder, when we had done this, say to me, so how much time do you need to do the training? And I said, we need 2 days. And she said, you've got a day. I said, that's fine. Let me show you. We worked with your folks. They rated all of these skills as significant to catastrophic, every one of these that we're going to cover during these 2 days. So you tell me which ones you want to take a chance on, and we'll pull them off and let them chance that. And she looked at that and she goes, you got your 2 days. I couldn't have done that if I hadn't really truly justified pulling people away from their work, to stop work, to learn. And that is so important, because trainers do things, and we can do in instruction things that mastery check, that give feedback, that make sure that we have done our due diligence, and that. But if the skills aren't critical to catastrophic, what we've learned is you can push that into the workflow with a digital coach, and people can learn like they do today on YouTube, but people can learn on their own. And if they make a mistake, they learn from it. As long as we've got the support system in place, they're learning while working. And we have found in the last 30 years that on the average, half of the curriculum in a training course, on the average, can be pushed in the workflow and learned exclusively with a digital coach. Half of it needs and merits what an instructor and what training can do. And what that does is when we shift and push into the workflow those skills, that gives us more time and ability to target those critical skills with the beauty and power of formal instruction.
Mm-hmm. Setting people up for success.
Yeah.
A few years ago, the International Space Station, I'm going to say 7 years ago-ish. Anyway, there was something, and I forget what the exact issue was, but there was an issue that the astronauts up there were needed to solve. It was pretty serious. And Chris Hadfield, former commander of the ISS, Canadian astronaut, had a tweet about, he said, this is why we do, we put in the hours and hours, the hundreds of hours of training before we go. Not because this exact thing is going to happen, but so that we have, all the foundation we need to solve something, that's unique. And I've got that screen capped somewhere. I'm going to have to dig that one back up. I used to use it in a session presentation, but it was about, clearly this, not every scenario can be accounted for, but let's arm you with everything when, burst lungs, burst, burst spacesuit or what, let's arm you for solving those problems, which is beyond just simply applying something that we've given you to do.
I see a question in chat that is really, all of them are important, but I don't want to miss this one. Early on, I realized that I had to focus on what I call knowledge enriched performance. So a performance first approach doesn't ignore knowledge. You just don't start with the knowledge requirements. We identify what is it that people need to do. And then our second question is, what do they need to know to be able to perform with the knowledge that they need to have to make the decisions, to be able to adapt and to adjust. And so we have, all of our solutions focus on performance, but we also identify what it is that people need to understand, the supporting knowledge that they need to have. And that is all part of the training process. So Adam, thank you for asking that question. Concepts are vital. The challenge is that concepts need to hang on or be attached to performance for us to be able to do something with it. And so even though we teach concepts ahead of the doing, the process of analyzing is we identify the doing, and then we ask the question, what do you need to know to be able to perform the steps of this task with understanding?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a big difference, I think, when we're out training, trying to figure this stuff out. One element that struck me, and I think also because there's a question in the chat, though, and I hope this doesn't take us in too big of a different direction, but as an industry, we're all instructional designers. We've all been taught the ADDIE model, and I don't want to take us back down that road again, but what do we call this new role? Is there a new role in the organization, in the L&D organization, for somebody that's just dealing with building performance support content, or building and working with systems that deal with like an online coach and all that kind of stuff, or designing those experiences and that internal infrastructure to enable that coaching and to supporting the technology required to support the moments of need, all of that. It's my thought on this is kind of all over the place, but it's mostly directed around, do we need to change? Does HR need to write different job roles? I mean, would that help people feel more comfortable?
Well, so that is a very a critical question for us to talk about here today. And that is, certainly there's a need for some specialists. But what I would hate to see happen is that those of us who are instructional designers, we have to step back and take a broader role. There are 5 moments of need. So to call ourselves a learning experience designer is just half of the deal. I'm a learning and performance experience. I'm a learning experience and performance designer, or I may be a performance engineer, or whatever we call ourselves. What troubles me is learning and development. Learning and performance development. We just need to begin to factor in the performance into this mindset.
Yeah.
That we need to have, right?
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't new roles that crop up. For example, there are technical issues associated with the world of performance support and digital coach, and we need to be able to build in those performance support, EPSS authoring systems, and there are unique skill sets associated with that. But in the design, our design needs we as designers, we have to see the whole picture and design for the whole picture. We can't specialize in this way. We've got to do that. One of the issues that became clear to me early on was, as I saw the 5 moments in this broader role, we were busy. And I thought, I don't have time to do everything that we're doing now, and I'm just focusing on new and more. And now I see I've got to apply and solve and change. And even though I had teams in those areas, how do you do all of that? And so back before we had online information, so forth, I created a model called One Stop Documentation. It's one manual that was a tutorial, a reference guide, and a student manual for classroom training. And that opened the door to, to this whole process of consolidating our practices. Our goal and objective has been to be able to develop a 5 moments of need solution within the same footprint of effort that an organization generally takes today to solve for new and more. And so that requires us to be agile. That requires us to become faster. That requires us to not add tasks and steps to our work, but to consolidate them and become very smart in what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
that's what I was. Go ahead.
I was going to say, just merely focusing on, or not merely, but switching to a focus on performance, thinking about what the tasks are that people have to be able to do, et cetera, also actually helps us winnow out some of the work, that we need to do. How often we're presented with all of the things, the information, but focusing on performance helps us achieve, a streamlining effect, even on that initial aspect of formal learning. We can winnow a lot of stuff out that it might be good to know, but isn't necessarily critical to the performance. So we can actually, work this out without necessarily adding a great deal more effort.
That is so true, because when you solve for performance first and you build your performance solution and you bring that into the classroom and wrap training around that, the content, the core content is in that performance support solution. And then you're wrapping activities and other things that are unique to the learning process, the initial learning process, rather than building, because all of that content matters, because we're training to independence, right? And so you're spot on. When we do this and design for performance first, we're able to then back into the learning and save just a lot of time and effort.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. Dino has a neat question in the chat. Have you applied this approach to leadership development? Because I think we're typically kind of framing mentally, or a lot of this around doing tasks, like this when complete this task, etc.
Yeah.
Have you seen or done this with those other kind of skills like leadership development that maybe are less specific in task?
Probably 70% of our work is on soft skills, areas of soft skills rather than
Wow.
procedural. Procedural is just easy, obviously. But so I just did a presentation at ICE, ATD's ICE, on leadership skills and learning in the flow of work with leadership. So one of my questions that I like to ask as we take on this issue is, so what do leaders do? Do they just sit around? Leaders perform. There is work that they do. It's just principle based, not procedural based. Principle based. Soft skills are principle based, but a task can have steps that are principle based steps or procedural based steps. And I am. Let's see. I'm right now. My next blog is going to address that. But the blog that we just published also addresses those soft skills. It has an example of a leadership. They were regional sales directors. We mapped their work. 80% of it was soft skills, and we documented it, built performance support around it. And I have an example of that in my latest blog that we posted on LinkedIn and on the 5 Moments of Need website.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, soft skills. That's everybody struggles with it. So it's nice to hear that. I love the idea of adding the principles in place of the process or as a sort of synonymously as far as how those get driven. It works out perfectly.
Yeah. It really does. I mean, like I said, all performance can be documented, but soft skills are documented with principle-based steps. I could show, if you want me to show you an example right now, I could bring that up, or you can just read this blog and the next one.
Go ahead and pull it up quickly, and we can tuck it in here before we start to wrap up.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
It is a critical thing that to think about this as a way of addressing things that aren't just merely procedural.
Let me bring that up here.
There are, as always.
Sorry, it's taking a moment.
No, that's all good. There are, as always, lots of great comments in the chat. Elizabeth is mentioning, this isn't a question, but she's sharing an observation. I've been working mostly on military contracts for the last 10 years. We've focused on performance-based objectives as well as identifying the needed supporting knowledge. The military also uses a criticality scale to determine what will be trained. Yeah, if there's a space where criticality of performance comes into place, I'm going to suggest the military is probably going to have a focus on that for sure. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, we're doing some work right now with NAVAIR, and they get it. Let's see there. I think that's the sharing.
Yeah, if you just mouse over your own video feed there.
Pick the monitor or whatever, and everybody, don't forget to go to his LinkedIn page and follow him and engage in the conversation.
Are you seeing this now?
Hasn't come up yet, no.
Not on my screen, not yet.
It says, is sharing my screen.
Oh, there it goes.
There we go. There we go. Yep.
So here is a principle-based task for the most part. There are some steps that are procedural, like step 2, record this in the CMS. That would be more procedural, but look at greet the customer. This is a principle-based task.
Got it. That's what you mean by that. Okay.
Turn that off.
That's all right.
Yeah. So you followed our practice called rapid workflow analysis, and this was the workflow for a regional sales director. This was the workflow. Underneath each one of these were tasks. Build your bench, develop personally. This was, their leadership of their team. This is their leadership in terms of the work. And we documented all of that. Here were the tasks. If you look here, these were if you can see that, underneath each one of those processes, these were the job tasks, some of which were procedural, some of which were principle-based, some which were a mix.
Very cool. It's really awesome to see that in a format that helps us all, I guess, envision what we can actually do for those kinds of things using the 5 moments of need approach. Yeah.
Yep.
Very cool.
Well, I
Brett,
think,
I was just going to say, probably time to start rolling the music and wrap us on out of here.
I'll go ahead and close that for you, Con. I got that. There we go.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you so much. No worries. No worries.
Apparently I did.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was just going to say, this has been fabulous. Con, I've used and referenced the 5 moments of need for a number of years now, because when I encountered it gelled so many things for me. As I said, I've always found it a positive kind of approach to making a better difference in our space too. And that's always been something else that I've really valued in it. Having you here with us today has been absolutely fabulous. We're so glad you could join us here today. Take a minute and drop in. Drop in any links to the to the website and your LinkedIn if you want to in the chat as we dance on out of here. And folks, we have the LinkedIn group that I think Brent's probably.
I got it. Oops, something's not
getting ready to toss in. And as always, the gentle reminder that instructional designers in offices drinking coffee. The reason we get to be idiotic together is because of Domino Learning Systems, where Brent and I both have various tasks that we carry out in our day, depending on the moments of need. And if it's of interest, I will toss that into the chat. One of the small things that I will mention is that with Domino One, we can do way more than just e-learning courses. We can help your learners throughout all of the moments of need. We really do have a neat structure for doing that. So a little plug for us. Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Let's dance on out of here.
Thanks, Con. Squeeze in one last special effect. Adios, everybody.